exist.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show, and welcome back
to another edition of That Rugby Union Show. And I always say what a week it's been in rugby, but we haven't seen too much rugby, but still it's been a week. We've had some drama from the British and Irish Lions, and was it a penalty, wasn't it? That's been the big talking point from down under. And also maybe if we should start worrying about the Wallabies, and maybe they're not the easy beats that perhaps some teams thought that they might be coming into the Rugby Championship. And then also Currie Cup Premier Division has gotten underway and some really high scoring matches. And I think before I even introduce our guest, who a lot of you will know, and we're going to talk about, I think, his journey, because it's been a fascinating one. My French is terrible, so Merwe, I'm not going to say anything other than bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, monsieur. J'espère que vous allez bien.
You see, I don't know what you said about my mother. This is not a good way to start this chat.
No, but lovely to see you guys. Hope you guys are well.
No, really good to see you, my bro. And looking forward to this chat. And I'm really glad that you can spare the time, because your household is like mine. There's kids running around, and I know it gets a little bit crazy. But Sim, I touched on the Currie Cup. Good evening to you. But it felt like, where have the defense coaches gone? Just high scoring matches left, right, and center. You know, the mauls, you saw, sort of 10, 20 meter mauls culminating in tries, yellow cards galore. I don't even know what the penalty and yellow card count was this past weekend, but I think in the one match, I think the Pumas match, there must have been about 4, if not 5.
Yeah, look, I think if you want to look at the whole defense thing, it's probably as much a sort of like attack thing as it is a cohesion thing. If you look at where the Currie Cup is now in the in the South African calendar, it's kind of like, it falls in between the URC and the URC. And so what happens is, there's so many players you can't get by such and such a time. It's not like they have like 6 weeks of preseason for the Currie Cup. And, if you look at most of the teams, with the under 20s doing so well, suddenly they've got all those kids, playing for them. I think Province had 8 of them. The Bulls had about 6. So I think once you do that, all you're asking for is, it's exciting, because obviously those players are great young players. But what you're doing is you kind of like, what you're going to fall behind on is stuff like, cohesion and how you go along. Also, first round of the competition this year, you're probably going to get a few blowouts, although you don't expect a blowout between, say, Province and the Bulls and, the Lions. Lions and the Sharks, that was a final, which was decided by an injury time penalty. And so you kind of like, you're not expecting those kind of results, but, first round it is. Now, I think it's a bit of that, a bit of ring rust, sort of a lack of cohesion amongst the troops, yeah.
Yeah, that said, it did give an element of yo, because the tries were all dramatic. There was a lot of errors. There was a lot of sort of very loose kind of play. When you see guys like Zane Davids, fronting up in the forwards for Province, then you must know it's going to be an open type game, but fascinating. What always fascinates me about Currie Cup, Flip, is the guys who tend to play at the higher level. So whether it was Super Rugby, URC now, and of course internationally, end up playing very few Currie Cup matches. And maybe that speaks to what Sim says about availability of all of the players. Did you play a lot of Currie Cup? I know there was a stint at the Griffins, obviously the Cheetahs as well. Or is it one of those where you didn't play as much as you thought?
No, I was very lucky. I even went a step back. I did a lot of Vodacom Cup rugby. I don't know if you, for the older folk in the crowd, remembering that. And famously lost the 2 finals against the Blue Bulls in the Vodacom Cup. But no, I think it's a good section. We will always be in love with the Currie Cup and what it represents in South African rugby, because we hold on to to the glory days of the golden trophy. I think it still plays a very important role, and I was very much in the intersection where the Springboks were taken away. I think it was initially Jake White who started that the Springboks don't play Currie Cup rugby because it mixed in with the end of year tour and the Rugby Championship, etc. And it's thanks to that I actually got my opportunity to go play rugby at the Bulls, is because the Bulls had everyone and his dog played for the Springboks, so they needed locks. So luckily I got my break to play Currie Cup rugby for the Bulls, and the rest is history.
Yeah, certainly is history, and we will maybe look back on some of it. But currently, where are you? You've made France your home. There's been a lot of interesting stuff that you've done, and I love to talk to rugby players and former players about the transition from being a player into the professional world. What are you up to?
Yeah, so thanks. So I'm in Biarritz. So Biarritz is in the southwest of France. Geographically a little bit like Cape Town, situated on the Atlantic coast. Came down here during COVID, and so it's been 5 years, and haven't left. It's quite a good spot. It's quite a good spot to live. It is very humid and rainy, so I miss my Pretoria days, but it's a good lifestyle to live in France.
And the guys in Biarritz, I mean, were they welcoming? I mean, you spend most of your time in France at Clermont.
Yeah. So I'm a Clermont boy. So for South African listeners, Clermont is like Bloemfontein of France. It's right in the middle, university city. Very French, extremely French. The people like Bloemfontein. The people don't speak English over there. So it was an interesting place to go. It was also obviously a very good place for me to go personally, to go knee deep into the culture and the language and understand what it's about, and obviously lucky to land with a very good team that we could win a couple of trophies. So I did take a UK turn before coming to Biarritz, but the Biarritz locals have been very accommodating. It's a rugby mad area, the southwest of France. You've got all the big teams are in the southwest: Bordeaux, Toulouse, Pau, Bayonne is right next door. So it's not very hard to bump into another rugby guy, and it's a great place to live.
So jump in after this, but you said the UK, was that for studies?
Yeah, so I stopped playing 2019. It feels like ages ago now, but stopped playing in 2019 for Clermont-Ferrand, and then always had the goal to do an MBA, and I got the opportunity to do my MBA at Cambridge, and so went over to Cambridge, did my MBA. The idea was to obviously do an MBA at Cambridge, then go work in the city or London. And COVID had other plans, like for many of us, but luckily for me, then decided to rather hang around in France, and it's been pretty good. So started my own business, a strategy consulting business that I run from here, and it's been pretty good. Yeah.
It's looked amazing. These guys love pressure.
Flip, is this you? Like, obviously living in Biarritz, not coming back to South Africa, is this where you've, chosen to settle? What, missing your son and all that?
Not at all. We are discussing it. I think I've got the 5-year itch, and maybe trying to move, and definitely have one foot back on the airplane. I'm very keen to come back to South Africa. Within the right context. I'm missing the people. I'm missing the smiles on the faces around. I'm missing a little bit of action. It gets bored in living in Europe every now and then. It's not the news is not news, you know. So no, I'm missing South Africa and being able to have an impact and being able to give back in the right context. And maybe it's a little bit of Springbok delirium, as everyone says it. But yeah, I've got a lot of my friends in my age group that's, you know, expats that made their way in UK or other places that's moving back slowly. So I'm definitely seeing, you know, it's a lot of people wanting to go back to South Africa, you know, either to make a difference, or, you know, either to like they say in Afrikaans, skeur on the op die wiel sit, you know, to work hard and do something and make South Africa work again. Yeah.
And tell me, I don't know if it was you, but I suspect it was. Was it you who was a qualified actuary, even as a player?
Wasn't me. No, I'm unfortunately the stupid brother.
It's with your good friends, right?
So yeah, so my brother is a studied actuary. I know the qualified actuaries will say you have to write the board exam under correction to say if he wrote it or not. But yeah, he's an actuary. He's an actuary and practices risk at the moment in London now.
Yeah, X, I must tell an interesting story. Just in doing my research, I read a story, obviously, which actually was about Flip's dad, Flippy. Himself, obviously, an ex-Springbok, way back in the 80s. So he was basically the future back then, because his height was like 1.96 meters and 133 kilos. That's what the props are now. You know, like back in the old days, the tight head prop was usually like, you know, short guy like Dougie Heymans, guy was about, you know, Austin Chair's height. You know, I don't know what changed there, but now suddenly, if you are going to be a tight head, you've got to, you know, look a bit of a monster as well. But he tells an interesting story there where, like, apparently Flip's mum, Karen, is also quite tall. And so basically, like, they ran into Doc Craven all those years ago, and Doc Craven says, listen, you two should marry, because, you know, you're both tall, and South Africa needs locks. And as it turned out, you know, like, Flip became a lock. He played for South Africa, and his boot was a lock as well. That's quite it's quite an interesting sort of, you know, like looking at a live Doc Craven sort of experiment.
Exactly. Yeah. So the old man that walked the streets of Stellenbosch, him and my mom, you know, that was the place to go, and played a lot of rugby for Western Province and for Stellenbosch, and was lucky enough to be tutored by Doc Craven. And that is, well, either hearsay or truth, we will never know. But it makes a good story, and we should never let the facts mess up a good story. The more you try to get away from rugby, the more it pulls you back. So I actually had a very good opportunity with ASM, the Club Clermont, where I played, to get into an administrative role with them. I couldn't bear myself to move back to Clermont-Ferrand and pack the family up and move there. That was purely a lifestyle choice. You know, so and as they say, the rest is history. And then the local Barrett's Rugby Club, with all its history and glamour and bourgeoisie, came up for sale, and a good friend of mine actually said, okay, he'll go and he'll get the financing right, and he'll take over the club, and he wanted me to join him and structure the whole process, which I did. And yeah, well, then the French became French. As soon as everything started going well, they had to turn the trolley cart upside down, and yeah, just lacking a lot of structure, a lot of logic, and a lot of responsibility about what you do with other people's money. And I said, yeah, I don't want to take responsibility for that. We seeing what's happening to Rocky Elsom at the moment, and I didn't want to be another example.
Yeah, you mentioned Rocky Elsom, and it's not the first time we've seen a former player pulled into, sort of administration. John Smith at the Sharks, there was an example as well. And, it wasn't an easy job, tough for Rocky at the moment with Australia and how they've gone over the last few years. But, it makes me wonder, Flip, if there's a difference from somebody who's played the game, moving into administration, from somebody who hasn't, someone who's come from elsewhere, from business or whatever background they might have. Does having been in the change room, having been on the field, having been a player, give you perhaps a slightly better insight, or call it the edge, as from somebody who doesn't have that background?
Yes, I do think it gives you an edge. I mean, it depends on what interested you when you played. There's a lot of people. I will definitely not be able to be a good coach. I know that already. I'm way too impatient, but I've always been interested in the way it works. Like any business operation, as I do today. What is the operating model behind a rugby club, and what is the income streams, and what do you need to make to pay these players? So with that, and there's very successful models, and especially in France, the way it's controlled, there's actually ways to make money out of these rugby clubs and pay the players well. So that's always been an interesting thing for me, and a curiosity. And obviously, as a player, you always think you can do it better than those guys. And then when you're on the other side, you have all the players telling you can do better. So so it's I did think it gave me some insight. It definitely gave me a lot of things that I shouldn't do. Don't be the president that goes into the change room on a Saturday and think you can all of a sudden say a magic word and now they're going to win. Just be sure be sure that the players are happy and the players are looked after, and everything is paid, and then they can perform at their best. Take the barriers out of the way. So that's my philosophy, and that's what I want to do. But yeah, it's not as easy said than done.
Flip. I mean, obviously, one of the big talking points in world rugby at the moment is just how much depth the French have in their rugby. I mean, they've just sent the second/third string side to New Zealand, and actually they gave a decent account of themselves. And then obviously, as South Africans now just recently introduced to the Champions Cup, we're becoming more and more aware just how powerful those teams are. What's your explanation for how French rugby's gotten itself to that, to that level? Obviously, I mean, they were pretty unlucky to lose, obviously to the Boks in the quarterfinal, at the World Cup. But for you, what are the pillars of where they find themselves? What is it that they've done?
Yeah, so the French are very strong. Rugby is very strong. It's right through from I would very much compare it to South Africa in terms of passion. When you look at kids and the way they play, and you play in a club system from your earliest days of rugby, you play for a club, so these guys, Ramos that played for Toulouse started there when he was 13 almost, so you get the sort of the legacy, walks through from the start. So that's pretty good. The administrative part in French, however big mess it might be or not, I think it counts for a lot. They have a type of an auditor general that looks after the clubs and ensures that the clubs are financially safe. And that's why we don't see any French clubs go under, and then and the league is controlled pretty well. I think that counts for a lot. And then you have a lot of leagues. You know, you have first division, second division, third, fourth, fifth division. You know, so there's a clear line between professionalism and amateurism. You know, something that we maybe struggle in South Africa with. Everyone wants to be a professional rugby player. So there's a clear division for everyone where they play and what they can achieve. There's a clear hierarchy of how things work and jeopardy, you know. So if you finish last in your league, then you go down, no matter how big or how small you are. We saw Stad say, you know, nipping at the bit this year. So I think that counts for a lot. So that counts that the cream rises to the top. We saw in that the French second division is a very strong competition, like extremely strong competition, and we saw that with the team they sent to New Zealand. There's talent that from second division that played international and lived up to the standards. So no, I think they've got a very good system, and obviously then, you know, you shouldn't hide away from, they've got a lot more money than any other rugby playing country to invest.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. You said a bit earlier that they seem to know how to make money from rugby. In my entire sort of over 2 decades plus of reporting about rugby's always been a black hole for money. It's not, you know, it's not a place you go into to make money. I mean, a great example, obviously, is the English clubs, you know, how the bottom, you know, seem to fall out of there. And obviously down here, we've now got sort of billionaire sort of backers, but still, you know, it's not making money. How do they make money out of rugby in France?
Yeah, so it's fun to go to games. That's one part. You know, so I think South Africa, we're a little bit spoiled maybe with super sport, or, you know, it's too easy to stay at home. That said, also they are very transparent about the media rights, etc. So everyone knows what they can get out of and how it works, you know, when you top and with what time you play, etc., etc. But you know, to take second division rugby, they would play 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and there would be 10,000-15,000 people in the stadium. You know, and in a smallish town, you know, if you compare it, I think you can compare it to the Vodacom Cup back in the day. You know, when you play Falcons against Pumas, you know, that you would get a lot of people, but, you know, so people are very passionate and patriotic about their local clubs. So I think that's something that you know, South Africa should look into, and, you know, don't just see it as a job and move from one thing to another, but, you know, the families grow up and they only want to play for a certain thing and certain club, and that's what they support. So the local community support, and they've got big numbers coming to the games, and big subscribers, you know, what are season ticket holders, you know, so that's the biggest part of it. They fill in the stadiums, so you can have all the revenue centers that you want. If you don't get the bums on the seats, then, you know, it's never going to work.
I mean, Flip, you are a grey boy, so I know you've watched a lot of cricket in your time, and it makes me wonder, having seen how they've gone about it with the SA20 and comparing it with the French model, where in France it really seems like people get behind their town's team, you know, like it's everybody belongs to the club. And in SA20 cricket, what we saw was these teams imposed on towns, but the way everybody responded and just absolutely lent their support wholeheartedly, regardless of not knowing some of the players, not knowing the coach, it seemed there was a real hunger to adopt a team for your town or your city. Do you think that maybe we should consider maybe a change in SA Rugby's model, maybe not necessarily when it comes to the unions, but if you look at the lower divisions, is there something there that we could tap into?
Yes, it's a very good point. I do think there's, especially the Currie Cup, you know, to look at something. You saw the numbers that came to when Boland played their first game. You know, what a dramatic end to that game. But you saw the numbers that came, and the different way of approaching, just listening to the locals, having a church service before kickoff, and so you've got no excuses not to go. So take away that barriers, listen to the people. When is a good time? What happens very much here is because the kids are affiliated to the clubs. Then if your kid at 8 or 9 or 10 years old tell you they want to go see the local rugby, the first team play because they play for the club, your parents say yes. So it's pushed by the kids, push pull, from everywhere. So I think that's a very good point. Looking at the Currie Cup, what is the model that we can impose? Can we, have these derby days where everyone sort of plays at the same day, or what is the model that we can have to, just fill up? It's Currie Cup is 8 games this year, but we can fill up the stadiums. There must be a drive to make that accessible. Whether it's smaller stadiums or whether what is the make people braai while they watch a rugby, maybe I don't know, but make it nice and interesting.
Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of That Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassie finds loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it. The one thing that I always found fascinating, Dobbo, is I don't even think you'll remember this, but it was probably a decade ago. We met for lunch with one Mr. Nick Mallett. I think it was somewhere around Newlands, and I think the opportunity for you to take over as Stormers head coach had cropped up, and I think it did a number of occasions. And you correct me if I'm wrong. And I remember you over that lunch, and there was wine there, so it really could be a lie. You sort of saying that you want to bide your time as a head coach. You don't necessarily want to jump into the job too early in your career because there's so much uncertainty. You don't know how long you're going to last in the role. The upheaval it causes is absolutely huge, not just for you, but for your family. And your family is obviously entrenched in the Western Cape, and your missus obviously back then was teaching, and you don't want to cause that kind of upheaval. And I thought that was what a fascinating look at what coaches should be considering, especially young coaches who might have big opportunities thrust in their direction.
It's a good memory of that lunch. You're absolutely right. Funny enough, Mr. Mallet is on our rugby committee now. He's back in. He's back on that. But he's not short of an opinion, and he's never. I can't even defend myself. I can't say, Nick, you're wrong. I didn't. No. If he's right, he's right. But no. Listen, the truth is, I would have been fired by now if I'd done the job then. And I think, it's, I love this project of the Cape Town, what rugby means to the people. I'm not a sort of guy, I see myself coaching the sort of copier derby between Toshiba and Panasonic. It's not going to mean anything to me like this one does. And so I wanted to really stay here and entrench myself and understand. I knew I wouldn't last. And listen, you saw my behavior at that lunch. It wasn't the stuff that's going to endure a head coach. You weren't great either, let's be honest, but the head coach forever. I think you got to be careful you've got to know when you do a job like that, you've got to sort of know what's going on and not be thinking of imposter syndrome and not be too obsessed, which we all are. There's not one coach you can say with some sort of form of ego and that sort of thing, and the Land Rover and that. And, I just knew it would be like Icarus if I was the coach, then. And Rob Wagner, who was this guy who was the CEO at the time, actually told me the other day, if he'd appointed me now, I wouldn't be coach anymore. So he's right. But I think coaches need to. I speak like I know everything. I'm just lucky as a coach that I've got amazing guys that work with me. I think that's one thing that maybe I did learn. Because it was your coaching staff, if they really, and perhaps that's a lesson from what's just happened in Pretoria. If your coaches are really, if you're really tight as a group and you trust each other and nobody's after your job, and you know, I never worry what Rito's telling the team or what Darby's telling the team or Norman's telling the team. And that was probably built over those years, you know, where we coached, we did all that in 20, we went to Griffins, we went to Namibia, we went to Esvidia 100 times and became really close. And I think that's probably helped some of the longevity now, which I don't know how much runway. I don't have another fifth Godspeed, I'll be on this podcast in a year's time, but let's see.
You got to talk about your playing days. You know, obviously, you know, Grey College, bit of cheetahs. I think one whole game for the Griffins. He must have been on loan or something. And then, I mean, and then as you say, you get your chance at the Bulls. I mean, it was an incredible time to get a chance at the Bulls. You know, obviously when you look at, who the two locks were there, you know, you had the Blood Brothers, and suddenly you got to try and sort of make a living in amongst those two oaks. And I mean, just talk us through, you know, that particular experience, because obviously, I mean, it must have been an incredible leap of faith for you to go to Loftus at that time, because I mean, Victor and Bucky's owned that place at the time.
It's well, not the two locks. Yeah, it was about the 5 or 6 locks that they had over there. You know, you had Dali Rousseau and you had Willem Steenkamp, and you had any guy you could talk about played there. No, it is very much a late bloomer story. To be honest, I was lucky. I think I played my first Vodacom Cup game for the Free State when I was 19 years old. And then from there, it was also, you know, when I started at the Free State, it was the golden years of Rassie, you know, and they started winning. My first game was 2004, and you know, obviously played final next year. They won it, then played a couple of finals in 6 and 7 again. You know, drew it. So I was thereabout, but also, you know, at great locks at Cornelius van Zyl and Baron Pieterse and Bjorn van Mark and Rory Duncan and you know, very good guys playing over there. Nico Breed that came in later, you know. So very much being in the right place in the right time, and being in the wrong place in the wrong time. You know, at the Cheetahs, I was due to surplus, but you know, I had the time of my life playing for the Shimlas, and I had time to finish my studies, etc. While being part of the golden era. I still remember 2007. You know, we were in the student house watching the Rugby World Cup. You know, very much unaware of what can possibly happen later. Same thing in 2009. Was officially the last year I was allowed to play for the Shimlas in competitions. They had still the USASA. We won the USASA week, which, you know, was the South African Cup of Universities, etc. And you know, so won that in the beginning of the year, and then in the end of the year won the Currie Cup with the Bulls. So very lucky to be right place at the right time. And when I got the call for the Bulls, I was working a day job at Sanlam, and you know, I just said I had to take the opportunity. I still love rugby. I still knew I had a lot of rugby in me. I was only 24 years old, so chomping at the bit, very keen to go. And I said, well, if it's only 6 months, you know, I'll get the opportunity to share a field, a gym, or whatever with the likes of Victor and Bucky's, Frida Priya, you name all the legends that ever played for Bulls, Brian Banner. You know, and yeah, took the leap of faith, and yes, and those guys were good to me. Everyone from the players to the supporting staff, coaches, medical staff, everyone just took me in, embraced me, coached me, and I think that was the biggest lesson. So, you know, every shortage that I had, they made it better, and made me a more complete player.
And obviously, I mean, you how many Super Rugbies did you win? You probably won what, the 2010 one against the Stormers. Yeah, you won 2010 against the Stormers. Listen, it's not bad because,
Hey,
there's only one South African team
waiting.
that's ever won this thing.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how that year worked out. 2009, it's very relevant at the moment. 2009, when I signed, um, Ian Swartz, that did all the contracting at the Bulls back then, gave me 2 tickets to go watch the Lions against the famous second test, Lions against Springboks.
Yeah.
Being a military, so what an experience to be introduced to Loftus. Um, so that, it was a very good time. And then 2010 started off. So obviously 2009 had a pretty good Currie Cup. I got an opportunity to play, just to play a lot of games at that level. Played most of the games, and then we won the final against the Cheetahs. And then 2010 had a full preseason with the Bulls, which is something equally as tough as what I'm going through at the moment. I think it is quite interesting. And then yeah, got in shape. There's no secret. Got in shape. Played with these warriors, around me. Guys like PSPs, etc. That you train with. So just iron sharpens iron, and I became a better player. 2010 season went quite well. Started off, and I remember towards the end of the season, I got dropped for a game against the Sharks because Buckies came back, and I was actually sitting in my car and crying because I just thought, oh man, I'm not gonna, because we were 2010, we were basically unbeaten everywhere, and I just saw where this is going, and unfortunately Buckies being Buckies, and that famous game we played against the Stormers, and I got my opportunity again to play in the final. So yeah, it was excellent.
And I mean, you talk about the Lions now. Obviously, your experience of the Lions was watching it from the stands. But did you take on have you taken in the last 2 tests? Obviously, against the Wallabies, and particularly, I mean, I'm very curious in terms of what everybody thinks about that incident, because it's weird. As a South African, I sat there and I thought, you know what, if that call had gone either way, I would have been okay. But I'm increasingly finding out that it depends entirely on who you thought was going to win the game. Like, which way, you think the penalty should have gone. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, because I don't think it was a penalty. I think it could have been a penalty maybe if the guy didn't try and milk it as much as he did.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a good thing for rugby, that if you try and play the referee, then the hand will always fall against you. So I think that's quite important. I won't say the test series shouldn't have played on that, although the margins are so small. But I think where Australia pulled up their socks a lot in the second test, and we saw what they could be and what they could offer as a team, which is pretty decent. I also, the Lions is sort of a weird one this year, where they have great players, but you just feel that they lack a lot of leadership. It's not like the 97 Lions or the 2009 Lions that came here, where you're like, sort of, you don't want to, you're scared to play against them, and they've got like, very good players in them and whatever. So, it's a bit of a obviously it's sad that the third test would be a dead rudder, but there's obviously a lot of pride to play for, and I liked what I saw from Australia last week. So hopefully they will continue with that.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. I mean, should we, as as South African fans, kind of worry that geez, these guys, because I think from last year, you watched how things went. I think that the Boks was the first time they'd played the Aussies in Australia and won back to back in Australia. It's like, you look at Australia and you look at the All Blacks touring there, and we always kind of like act like it's easier to tour in Australia. But actually the results, are pretty similar in terms of what we can and cannot do there. But, this time around last year, it seemed simple. The Boks went there, got the job done and moved on. But do you sit and you think actually maybe, South African fans should worry just a little bit, especially when you consider the caliber of opponents that the Boks have played versus obviously what the Wallabies have been able to do with the Lions.
Yeah, well, it stays rugby, so the more games they play, the better they will get. It is a bit of a shame that the organisation of Rugby Australia is in such shambles, and you listen to a bit of a discussion around what's going on, and a new coach coming in, the players and the grassroots side of rugby is struggling a little bit in Australia. Outside of that, I think they have exceptional talent. You can see the guys when they touch the ball, got a little bit space. There's something happening, and the players like Will Skelton coming in, made a hell of a big of difference. Ruffling up the feathers. Them playing 2 games against the Springboks in South Africa, technically shouldn't cause any harm. But it stays a rugby championship. There's so much tradition in it, that it would be almost second guessing myself. No, but they are playing twice against Australia and South Africa. Yeah, so I don't think it should cause them any harm, but seeing how if they manage to pull off a win against the Lions in the third test, no matter what the result of the test series, I still think it will give them a lot of confidence. Will give them some more time together as a group, and then will give us some trouble.
And tell me, when you look at the Boks, I mean, actually, I didn't know that you played a bit under Rassie, all those years ago. But obviously, Rassie started coaching so early that it actually makes a bit of sense. When you look at the Boks, what are your thoughts there? Because obviously, we've kind of almost seen the two sides to them. The first one being, they actually didn't have such a great game in that opening test against Italy, or they said they hadn't had a great game, even though they won 42-24. And then obviously the tricks came in the second one, and, a game they played with one man less, but still managed to keep the visitors scoreless. What do you make of what you've seen of them in these 4 games, obviously including that, test against Georgia and the one game against the Barbarians?
Yeah, it is an interesting phenomenon, and Rassie is getting something right to keep all these players interested. And obviously what he's doing well is breeding these new young talent to keep into the team and keep them hungry. And I definitely think that keeps the older guard on their toes. It's a very sensitive subject because the senior guys want to be there. You always want to play rugby for the Boks. You always want to be the man in the saddle, make decisions. The bigger guys, they need more game time. You could see a guy that Peter Steff, he was better the second test than the first one back. We would like to see Eben play a couple of test matches, one after the other, because then you become better at test match rugby the more test matches you play. So I think we will see the Boks being a little bit more focused going into the Rugby Championship, maybe experiment a little bit less. And when I say experiment, as in change the whole team from one week to another, I say that we all know Rassie will definitely have something. You will have something up the sleeve, and I think it's kudos to them as a squad to be open and honest enough with each other that they can continue like they are and still be performing. I think that is very good from them.
Talk me through the experience of I mean, I know he was a younger coach at the time, but talk me through the experience of being coached by Rassie, because obviously it seems like it's a completely different experience. It doesn't matter how you know who you are, where you're from, because he just takes you by surprise. It sounds like.
Yeah, from what I get, these days he's dropped the intensity a little bit. He was, yeah, he demanded a lot, but for good reason, and he always knew what he needed in a rugby team. What player in which position it was very clear playing rugby under. Excuse me, very clear playing rugby under Rassie. And training was tough. I can remember particularly, we had long sessions, one day train kickoffs for almost like 2 hours non-end. Just that's the way it was, and we used to have those 3-4 hour video sessions of precision. So I think obviously, that was his first gig, and he had an idea of how to do it, and he's matured through the Stormers and through Munster and now through the Springboks. How many years he's been with the Springboks already? And even when I left in like 2011 and 2015, he was already involved a little bit with the Springboks. So the guy knows rugby, and he knows South African rugby inside and out, and he knows what to do to get the best out of these players, and you could see him pulling those triggers, and you could see he still likes it. I think that's the best thing about Rassie, is he's got an absolute passion, and he's an absolute genius in his trade.
Just to take you back a bit, obviously to your particular Springbok career. I heard you earlier saying you were working at Sanlam when you got the call from the Bulls, and you thought, let me give it a bash and see what happens. Obviously thinking about you're probably gonna work, but obviously you did well enough to actually get into the box. I think you would have been in as a Peter de Villiers and Heyneke Meyer's box for your
Peter Villiers and Heyneke Meyer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Talk me through. Did that in a strange way, did that come as a bit of a surprise for you, despite being, a Springbok son? And, in most cases, there is a bit of expectation that you'll go on to do it simply because you are a Boks son. But, did that come as a bit of a surprise for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first call is always a bit of a surprise, and not to sell myself short, but I'm not the second row that scored 7 tries a match, etc. I was just a normal hard worker. There was never media expectation of this guy has to play wherever. But so the first call I got completely stunned. I could remember 2009 after the successful Currie Cup campaign of the Bulls. I had to hand my passport in, because there's a larger squad of Springboks that they prepare, and I was told to hand my passport, and I was like, what does this mean, etc. But then found out there's about 60 guys that had to hand their passports in and whatever. So it wasn't something particular, but nonetheless. And then when the call came to, I was not in the initial squad of Springboks announced, but then they through a couple of injuries they had at the first game, I was called up for the test week against France, and it was completely out of the blue. I didn't expect it, and what a great journey it was.
And I mean, just talk me through the experience. What your highlights were. Unfortunately, I noticed that you didn't make either of the 2011 or 2015 World Cups, despite obviously being in play for that time. Just talk me through, the journey of being a Springbok, and over and above that, obviously, whatever highlights you may have had there.
No, I think it's exactly what you say. Is the journey is the memory that will always stay with me, and what I will always appreciate. It's the yes, we had such a good time, and Peter de Villiers side and the Heyneke Meyer side, where we started sort of from scratch, and Heyneke had this vision that we want to win the 2015 World Cup. And as you say, will always be disappointed not to be able to play World Cup, because I played 38 odd tests, so 2 World Cups. It could have made me a 50 capper, so there's always the what if, but nevertheless, it wasn't to be, and I'm not a sad guy tonight because I didn't play World Cup, but managed to share a Springbok jersey with incredible Springboks, from the old guard, John Smith and Brian, and I played with all the Centurions that exist today. I played a bit of Springbok rugby, so that's pretty awesome. And to think that I shared a field with Percy Montgomery and Brian and Victor, surprises me every now and then. But and then when sort of in the limelight of my career, when the young guns started, Sia and Eben and them, and you can see them coming in and nurturing them a bit to get where they are and where they are today, and totally in control and heroes of the country. It's something very, very emotional and very good to see.
Just looking at the current box squad, for me, what I've seen as the talking points, maybe if we were to, and this is nitpicking, obviously, because they had a squad of 46, which, they chopped and changed without any sort of discernible, changes in performance. So it seems like the general consensus is, people are talking more about maybe the depth at hooker. And then, which of the fly halves is number one, because we've obviously got 3 fly halves who are very different, but also, very good as well. And then obviously there's a big talking point is at number 8. What are we doing there? Because, with Jasper suspended, suddenly we don't have a specialist number 8. Obviously, Elrich Lowe and Cameron Heyneke are injured. So obviously those would have been probably the 2 guys that, would have filled in there. But what are your thoughts in terms of those positions? Are you happy with our depth at hooker? Are you, what do you think, which direction do you think we should take at 8? And, do you have a favorite of these 3 incredible fly-offs?
Yeah, so we're so spoiled with incredible talent in South Africa, aren't we? Excuse me. You go through and you see the under 20s play and the pace and the passion they play with. It's the skill they have. It's quite exceptional, and the size. I think it's. I haven't seen a lot of rugby teams where the locks looked like they were the smallest players in the team. They were, the players under 20 were enormous. No, I think we definitely have a lot of talent, and kudos again for Rassie and his team for scouting. As you say, we're like, who's going to be the next hooker, and all of a sudden they find another van der Merwe somewhere, and the guy is exceptional. So I think they, we can trust that they have their hand on it. We can see there's a very good school system going that's still funneling those talent through, and then we have to know that the box, the green squad and whatever they have these days, to keep that tunnel and keep a hand on that funnel is good. Currently, it is a coin toss there between all the good talent. You say, I actually forgot that Ulrich and Cameron Heyneke they injured, because when the Bulls played URC, they made a little stop here for the semi-finals of the Champions Cup. They played against Bayonne, and I met up with the team when they joined the Bulls for team dinner, and I saw a couple of these guys, and look like that. Kobus Visse is a monster. He's an absolute
he's a big boy. Big boy.
And I think he's going to become a great Springbok. And I think his older brother Yassi should watch out, because if he's been going to be branded as an indisciplined guy, then the younger brother will step up and take his spots. So I think that's what keeps competition going, is that we have such great talents that anyone can step up. I was happy that we saw Paulie come back in a test and just take control, because we've got these wizards at 10 that can cook up anything any day, and then just showed that you need calm and composure sometimes. We'll always win a game, in the end, especially when it's test matches. So I don't want to be a Springbok coach and pick those guys where we want to go. Where I maybe see is in the centers. We playing Damian Dalende. That poor guy is playing 50 test matches a year almost. He's playing so much. He's playing so much rugby. Who's the next guy stepping up in that enforcer role? Because him and Jesse, they're forming a formidable centre pair. So is Ethan Hook, Ethan something, I can't remember.
It's Ethan Hook, yeah.
Yeah. They're quite good. So who's the next guy stepping up there? So but yeah, we're blessed with so much talent.
Jeez, I see X has finally joined us.
Yeah. He's got load shedding just on his house.
So before you sort of formally joins us, just to take you back, you've obviously you've tried your hand at administration, and you've obviously got thoughts about how competitions should run. When you look at the Currie Cup, obviously I think one of the big issues in South Africa is that nobody really knows where to put it. Where to sort of, put it on the calendar. How would you sort of reposition it? Would you find it a completely new spot or slot, or would you go along the lines of maybe going, it must run concurrently with the URC, so that almost a bit like the Vodacom Cup did with the, with Super Rugby all those years ago?
I do see it as a breeding ground for young talent. You will always have that gap between young age group rugby and then having enough beard to play professional rugby, especially in the forwards, etc. I do think South Africa, what they struggle with is they have too many professional players. I do think they unions need to be aware of that part and maybe make the amateur side bigger. Maybe is it club rugby? Is it the other unions? Because we were talking about the Falcons and the Leopards and etc. What's happened to them? Why are they sort of suffocating a slow start? It's not only about funding, but it's about resources in terms of players and being available. I think the professionalism is something we need to look at and say, okay, well, maybe we need a bigger amateur arm, make Varsity Cup a bit of a bigger competition, where we can maybe up the age, but then where people should definitely still study to get through that type of NFL college football type of league, and then make professional rugby just limit the number of professional players you can have, and that will make all the different divisions of rugby you have much more accessible and good for people to play.
And Flip, just to ask you my last question. When you look at the Boks now, one of the weird things that have happened with the Boks under Rassie is that, when he came in 2018, it was only, like 18 months before the 2019 World Cup, and they went on and won it. And then obviously they didn't play in 2020 at all because of COVID. But then, even in 2021, they couldn't really develop the squad because they had to win. They had no choice but to win. we've now had like 4 years. It's weird. I mean, as a journo, we tend to worry about absolutely everything. My worry is, is like 4 years too long in terms of showing our hand. I know it's negative, but like it's kind of like an interesting question for us journalists,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I've always had a great relationship with journalists. No, I think it's always so difficult because you don't want to put your head out there and say, well, we're definitely on the right path for the next World Cup, because you never know, it goes off and then you lose a quarterfinal by 1 point and everyone says it's not a successful year. So I think we're definitely on the right spot to breed more talent and get the right people in the right places. Because we're seeing the age profile. I think that's the word on everyone's tongues these days. Is can we play another World Cup with a bunch of Dagga boys and actually pull it through? And that very much depend on squad depth, and then you have. But I do think we have enough young guys and young leaders coming through, because that's the thing that's all around world rugby. I think that you see lacking, especially England, and that sort of part of players is you're lacking leaders. You're lacking people taking control and taking responsibility. So you're seeing guys like a young Jan Hendrik Wessels, out of nowhere. I think he's racked up with a couple of tests, so 10 odd tests or whatever, so in 3-4 years he'll be there and in the seat and be a leader and know what's going on. So no, again, I've got up in Rassie we trust that he
Well, look, guys, I unfortunately can't stretch this out any longer, so I really do value you for your time, Flip, and Sim, thanks for jumping in there. So thanks, gents.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was great to thank you, Sim, for managing it out. But, we have to stomach the boomers every now and then. But thanks, X. It was great seeing. It was great seeing you guys, and you guys are doing well.
Well, that was a really fascinating chat. And, we obviously spoke about a lot of rugby, a lot of Flip's journey, but so fascinating to just sort of sit back, Sim, and let you sort of have this conversation, because I really do feel like it's an important one to have, especially when it comes to players transitioning. Well, guys, we will be back next week. Don't forget some pretty big rugby coming up, at least the biggest being the British and Irish Lions. It's the third test against Australia, and we know that the series is already settled, but the Aussies showed that they can do something. They can mount a bit of a challenge. So make sure you don't miss that one. And of course, all the Currie Cup onto round 2. And I wonder if what Sim says will come true. Will the teams find each other a little bit better? Will we see better discipline in round 2 of Currie Cup to what we saw in the first round, where things were very disjointed and quite loose, I suppose. My final thoughts on what I thought was a fascinating chat is that, one, and I feel passionately about this, if you're a young rugby player and you happen to watch this, plan for the future while you're playing rugby. Don't wait until the end. Don't wait until you're not sure. Don't wait until the contract or the injury. Start doing stuff while you're playing. There are a couple of big names who did this. Tendam Tawarira has done this. Yari du Plessis was a doctor and practicing whilst he was playing. He'd finish off on the field on a Saturday playing Super Rugby and head off to the hospital and work overnight. I'm not saying you need to drive yourself to that degree, but it's certainly worth thinking about. And 2, be wonderful to see Flip Merwe back in the country and leading a union or involved there in SA Rugby. Wonderful that you not only pick up the learnings from the rugby field, but off it as well. So thanks very much, Flip, for that. And thanks to you, Sim, for driving that convo. Really enjoyed it. Thank you at home for joining us. See you next week. Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of That Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassie Erasmus loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it.
Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show.
It's That Rugby Union Show.
So